Alrighty, let's get this show started. Hello and welcome, everyone who's watching. Today we're making a beat. Don't really know what kind of vibe I'm gonna go for just yet. I was actually doing a little bit of a test stream just earlier, just to make sure I caught the that I had the correct levels here. So today we're gonna be starting off with a basic beat. I have already written a very simple kind of boom bap style pattern on this sequencer. I am using Reason 11, the Reason 11 beta. You may not, it may seem a little weird. It's just a tiny bit different from Reason 10, and if you're using full blown Reason 11, this is kind of all similar. I mean, they really haven't made much of revision changes since I believe 9. I bought 9 not too long ago, and well 9.5, and upgraded automatically to Reason 10. But here's a very basic boom bap beat. Not much going on. I'm using a preset on Kong, which I've actually routed in an interesting manner on the mixer. So you see here that I have them all split into their own channels, and so I also have a bus where I can just like up and lower the volume of all the tracks all at once, or go individually. Usually a big fan of that, so it just allows me a little bit more control, because sometimes I also like adding effects to single tracks here. And so just like that, we already have something that's just a little bit more interesting. Actually, one of the things that I do enjoy doing is actually, instead of using a full 16 hi-hat, let me just go ahead and remove it and turn it to one every 8th note. But then adding some delay to it, because then it just kind of gives it more of a flow to it. And so here now we already have something that's a little bit more moving in terms of like just a simple beat. Like I literally have not changed anything from the beat besides just removing a couple notes and adding a couple of reverbs and effects. As far as it goes for the bass drum, though, I don't really mess with it too much. It's already on a compressor. So you'll see that if I go here, there's already a compressor already on like the main effects bus. I know some people opt to go for the effects bus here. Let me take off the camera. To do the effects, to add compression in here. I'm not too well versed with it, so everything that I'm doing here is actually all self-taught. Didn't have any formal musical training or anything like that, so I'm just kind of going on a whim. But yeah, so this is kind of just what you can do yourself. Like, you don't really need a whole lot of musical training to just make something for yourself. So we'll go back here to just the bass drum, which is a preset that I've created a while ago. So this is just a very basic preset that I myself have created, and it's not too crazy. So you'll see just a kind of a gritty thing. I typically like working in an F minor scale or C minor scale, depending on how I really feel. And most of the times I just draw in what would be the bass line. Like I said, not too much going on. Like I said, something that I've just kind of been doing for the past couple years. And very basic stuff. I mean, super basic stuff. Like, So very simple stuff. I don't like that. Actually, we'll keep it that way. And then I want to copy these over and actually put them an octave lower. So let me lower these, paste those. So now we have just adding a little bit of sub bass to them, even though this is already kind of low in sub bass. Like you'll see here that I'm on like the C4, C3 area in terms of like how high it is. But because if you look back onto my preset here, I lowered it 2 octaves. Both of the things going on here. So this is a soft synth that I like using. That's kind of it came with Reason 10, and I love this thing. Like this thing is amazing. It can create very complex sounds, or you can just go super basic and create very basic sounds. So that's kind of what I did. Like I didn't really do a whole lot. So if you are more tuned to a different DAW, say instance Ableton or Pro Tools and whatnot, and if you have Serum, which is the synth that I have as well, I just don't have it enabled right now because I just want to go just with Reason. I'm just kind of more familiar with Reason, so I just kind of will stick to that. If you use Serum, like a lot of this will look very similar to what you already use. Essentially, you have your oscillator, you have your filter, you have your unison stuff, with essentially how many voices you can have on a single note press. So, say for instance, you press an F, you get like that thicker sounds. Like say for instance, like say how little it sounds. Let me just disable the other. It's awesome. So this is the very basic version of that. And I just went ahead and added, a sine wave to go along with it, so give it a bit more width, just to give it a bit more of a cleaner feel to it, and then added some unison on top of this sawtooth is changing into a triangle wave, so it's kind of in between, but you get this fuller sound. And so here we have that I've created a basic drum pattern, and now I've created a very basic bass line. And I usually, when I do my loops, I will do them in 8 bars, and then essentially, if you don't know anything about music in terms of bars or notes, quarter notes, and all that good stuff, essentially a bar would be this line here, a line here in the sequencer. So this is a bar, this is a bar, this is a bar. So I do 8-bar loops because it just helps with the music creation. And I see here that I have my bass line set for a 4-bar loop. So we have and sometimes what I'll do is that I actually will change the second half of the loop to maybe a little bit higher register in terms of like the last couple notes. So maybe instead of doing it like this C note, then I'll just bump it up to maybe oops, sorry about that. Let me revert that. I don't know, let me see. Do I want a G note? If I raise it up to a G, that might be interesting. So we do that, and then keep that one there, and then maybe do that. I want to see how this sounds, because sometimes, like I said, I don't have any formal musical training, so I just kind of go by sound. And this transition is a little too harsh. So let me do it. kind of prefer the falling version of that. To go from up down. That sounds a little bit better. So let's add something else to it. I am a big fan of pads and big fan of violins, actually. So I'll go with a violin. And I'm going to be using, actually, you know what, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use Reason's built-in NNXT because they have a really good preset that I enjoy using a little too much. And one of the things, like, you know, people will say, oh, you should use your own stuff, you should make your own presets, you should make your own instruments. And I'm all for that. Like, I think it's a good way to learn about your music, your sound development if you want to get your own sound and stuff like that. But also don't be afraid to use presets. I mean, that's what they're there for. Like, sometimes you see something that, or hear something that you like. And one of the things that I like using is this Redemption one. Let me just copy this over because I want to listen to someone solo that so you guys can hear it. Let me lower it in a mix just a bit. And let me copy this down too. So maybe what I'll do is I'll actually join these clips because they actually will work in tandem together. So let's hear how these sound together. So actually what I'll go ahead and do is delete these quarter note entries in there because they don't really serve much of a purpose. They're a little too short for them to actually have an effect on the violins. Because if you heard it, it has a slow attack, meaning it has like a slight buildup. And so then you hear, let me play it back again. So you see how it kind of swells into the note itself. And when you have like a quarter note or like much shorter notes, the effect is lost. So you don't, like, it starts to build up, but before it even builds up entirely, it's already moving on to the next note, and it starts to build up, so it sounds really quiet and dim. So let's get rid of that. So that way, so see, now it's like a much cleaner path. So let's hear it. And let's mess around with the levels. Okay, I add a big crusher to this bass line. Little bit of reverb. No. Adding a reverb to the violins. Yeah, that should be good. I'm actually gonna try to add a reverb into the baseline. No. So you'll see here. I have a couple of effects already kind of in line, kind of set up already, just for me as synths, FX synths. It is kind of a tactic that I use from a different streamer actually. So you'll see here, like I have my order set up. I have my main out, which has my volume, my EQ, and my maximizer. So before it actually goes out all the way, it hits all this stuff. So this is the last step of the audio chain. And then this is kind of all my effects sends. And you'll see here that I have reverb, I have a chorus, delay, another delay, another reverb. This is a kind of a note repeater, a bit crusher, and have a filter, even though this I might switch out because it's not part of my main thing. And then on the right hand side, you see I have all of my instruments. And I just better organization on my behalf. It just kind of makes it easier for me to just look at it and then be like, okay, I know where this is all at. So let's see here. So we have like a basic loop going on. This is good for a verse. One of the things that I like to add in this are tambourines, because you know, track can always use good tambourines. And once again, using a preset that's already in Reason. Let me just stop the audio here. This is one that I usually go to. And then I'll copy the loop to track because it's just easier that way. And you'll see here, you see the copied loop. Oops. You have the loop already onto the sequencer here, and let's go ahead and hit play on that. Actually, let me, before I do that, I want to go to the levels. I don't like having it super high. And add some reverb to it. Always good. Reverb is always good. Alright, so if you saw that there, I'm actually like panning the I should move this camera over to the left because that's where I don't usually operate. So let me do, oops, wrong one. I meant to move the webcam here, so let me move this over to the left because I don't usually operate too much in terms of like on the left hand side of the mixer. That's only when I'm actually towards the end of the track that I go through all the levels and go through everything. Right now it's a very, very basic mix in terms of what I want it to sound like and everything. I don't usually do a mix. I'll mix it in as I go through along because I just want to know where like I want to have the instruments on the track. So here, let's go ahead and let's see, what else can we add to this? Let me go to the instrumentation here, and I usually already have like my template set up with a second Europa instance on it. Let me just move the webcam off to the side again, because like I said, the right hand side is what's more important. So let's see here. So here I have the second Europa, and it's usually set up on an initialized patch, so meaning there's very basic sound coming out of it. So if I play a note here, oh, gotta have it selected first. It's just a simple sine wave, nothing going. So usually what I end up doing with this is that I'll end up making a ARP sequence in here, and it's actually fairly easy to do that. If you've ever done art, typically I like having it to be the tack all the way down, so it comes in super quick. So and then the little bit of release, so you get the little lingering sound. And that's all well and good. But I like having it to be either a pulse width, um, a pulse width wave that I'll add some modulation to, and I typically modulate it on LFO2 here. Um, Not that drastic of a change. I usually just do. Let me see here. Where is the? So I want to do. I want to do shape. Just a little bit. You see that it goes back and forth, back and forth. Because if I actually disable this, so you see it's just a straight up square wave, and you'll see it's a little harsh. A little harsh. A little harsh. I like adding it, giving it a little bit of pulse width, because it just makes it a little bit more interesting. It's a little harsh. I'll actually filter that and actually do that now. But you see it retains some of that movement. That's what's cool thing about pulse width. That you can make, pretty decent sounding stuff, fairly basic movement. And then if you want to increase the effect, I typically will do it, but I will lower the rate just to go slower through it. And then add some unison to it. A bit more width. Maybe do a little bit less of a blend. Actually, we'll go back to 50% on this, because that sounds a little bit better. And let me add a sawtooth wave through the bottom. Let me filter this one a little bit differently, so I'm not gonna have a keyword. So maybe one thing I don't like too much about Europa is that it doesn't do like the frequency here. It doesn't tell you the frequency on the filter for the individual one. It does tell you on here on the main filter, but not on the one for the specific oscillator. So these are all per oscillator here channel. So you see here I have this one. I don't have it enabled because I usually run this one. I wanted to be able to hear some of that tingly stuff at the high end. But for stuff like this, for like say for instance this saw wave that I'm trying to put on here, I can only go by hearing essentially, because I can't really know what the frequency is. I can kind of guess by like the position of this, because technically would be the same. But I will actually, what I'll end up doing, let's see, let me add some resonance to it, just a tad bit, and then add that. Ooh, okay, so we'll do that, and then let's add the other two back. It's a little harsh, but you can hear that soft stuff at the bottom. Barely there. Let me raise the volume a little bit. So maybe my beat is good. I mean, I would have to hear it. I usually don't allow links, but I don't know if you want to send it to me in a tweet. I can open up my Twitter here. I don't know what the 3 stars were. I don't know if you put something. So LeBron James. If you can hear me, just tweet at me. My Twitter is at. Oh, well. Let me see. Let me try to give. Let me see if I can give you. Allow you to post a link here. Well, try to post a link and see if it actually does anything. Do you have a link to it or? Yeah, I didn't get it. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me open up my Twitch here and see if I can give you. Oops, sorry about that. Let's see here. Try it again. Yeah, it's still wiping it off. Can you try sending it directly to me? Like send me a whisper. Uh, don't really want to give that out, in all honesty. Screw it. Try to send it to. Let me see if I can type it out here. Are you able to see that? All right, so I have my email open. Once you send it over, I'll play it, and then we'll go from there. In the meantime, we'll go back to the sequencer here. And I'm going to copy this over to my second Europa here. And if we go back to the instrument side of things, Reason has this really cool scales and chords, which I'd use a lot. If you don't have any, let me see here. So let's see, actually, just got your link here. So let's see what we got going on. Is it the one that says fire? Or is it a different one? Because I have, let's see here. So I have your Audio Mac thing open. All right, so I'd say, well, it's a really short beat. Like I only see that it's 30 seconds long. I would recommend extending it to an actual full beat. There is quite a drastic transition in it, so it doesn't seem too cohesive. Um, I'm gonna just listen to another quick one of the other tracks. Oh, almost loud.
Hey, I'm in the booty hole recording. I'm recording. I'm in the booty hole recording. It's more important. On my mind, dildos made in heaven. BBC, the conscious got booty on my.
Okay, so you're more into trap beats, is what I'm looking at. Yeah. So the one that's fire that you say fire here, I would say it working it a little bit more in terms of like extending it and drawing it out into a complete beat, and then actually have like something, um, like just have something go like kind of keep it similar, because like I said, you start off like a.
Hey, I'm in the booty hole recording.
Oh, I don't know why I went back to that one. So you have one beat here that started with an intro, which is completely not part of this beat, and then it changes into something else. If you're trying to go for a breakdown, I would say, like I said, extend it a little bit more, and then you'll be all right. But so far, like sounds. I wouldn't recommend Reason entirely, just because it's kind of a niche product. I'm assuming you probably did this in Fruity Loops or Ableton or whatever. Whatever you're using is whatever DAW you're using and whatever you're comfortable with. Is I would recommend keep using that. Just because it's just better that way. Um, but in terms of like, it really boils down to whatever you're comfortable with, and if let's see here, any sort of like music background that you may have, or even if you're self-taught, like I think did a DAW called Trash. I've not heard of that DAW. But yeah, like I said, I wouldn't really recommend Reason if you've never done it before. It is kind of intuitive if you're barely starting, but if you like I said, if you already started with something else, the more modern DAWs, like Reason is good for their instruments, but in terms of like for like their MIDI stuff or some of like their automation stuff, like Ableton is better, uh, or Serum is like sorry, Reaper's better. Like the other ones that are out there, the bigger names ones, like you'll probably like like those more than this one. I just use Reason just because it's what I've used forever. Well, good luck, man. I wish you the best of luck. So, let me go back to this real quick, just because got off track here. So let's go back to the sequencer stuff and to make just something a little bit more interesting in terms of this. So here we saw that I've already copied the same melody pattern down to the second Europa, and I've added what is called a player in Reason, and there's something similar in other DAWs, kind of already built into their MIDI sequencer. Um, that essentially all it is just like a scales and chord. All it tells you, it's like what scale you're in and what chords go along with it. So now if you press a single key, it actually plays a chord. And so what I'm gonna do here is that I'm probably gonna wipe off this other stuff. All right, so let's see here. And so then now we're gonna add like a little arpeggiator. Um, I like keeping it in this form. So let me do just write in my own little pattern here, just something that I kind of just like default to. Like I said, this is kind of more just me messing around with some stuff. It's not the best thing out there. So here we're gonna go ahead and solo this track. Let me lower the in the mix just a bit. I don't want it to be too loud. It's quite a drastic change. Let me. Don't like that. Don't like that. Let's try this different sequence. Let me go with this. Actually, let me listen to it. No. Alright, so I think we have our arpeggiator going. That seems alright to me. So I think we already have like the main loop of our verse done for now. Let's see here. Trying to think what would be a good addition to this. Because essentially we would like to transition out of what this is. So essentially it would be our regular verse beat into what would be, I presume would be like the hook. Usually for that, I do a couple of changes, not very many drastic changes, but I usually will add another instrument, something that's a bit higher in the register for just to differentiate it quite a bit from the verse beat. And you'll see here I'm doing a couple of exports here. So essentially I'm just exporting the MIDI files created in those two sequencers that I was running, so one for the drum and one for the arpeggiator. And I typically like putting these on their own track, mostly because it's just easier to organize it in that way. It's a bit tedious, but I've kind of gotten used to it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ableton will allow you to do this a little bit easier. But then again, I don't really use Ableton all that much, and I'm starting to learn it. Just started playing with it a little bit more today. So maybe I'll do some more messing about on that. But let's see here. So now we have each one of the channels or the respective instruments in its own track. And so now if we just solo it, you see that it's one, but then I can mute each individual one. Typically, that's why I like having them to be separate. Even though I can technically do this in the mixer side, um, sometimes I just enjoy doing it here. Is instead of having to mute and unmute on the mixer, I can just simply remove the MIDI track and add the MIDI track. It's just a little easier for me. So for the hook, so let's go ahead and shift this over to our loop over to the side here. So I typically like having it to be also 8 bars. And it is, this all can change and, all that stuff. Let me add another track because I typically like, I like adding cymbals and stuff to it. So let me add a crash. And then let me add a build-up here, so which is for first crash. And all that does just essentially like adds a little bit more flavor to it, and it gives it a bit more emphasis on some stuff. And then what I like doing too here, if go into here, I'll add a couple extra snares. And this is where you want to go a little crazier in terms of this is again a very simple pattern, but it just adds a little bit more energy to it. If you're into trap beats, this is typically what you'll hear, because these would be called the snare rolls. And at the same time, you can also do this with the hi-hats. You can add a couple extra ones before. I like doing that. Or in some instances, what I'll do is that I'll drop it to a different kind of snare, like different hi-hat, in this case being an open hi-hat. I don't usually do that all too often, but let's give it a try for this. Because once again, we want to differentiate ourselves from the chorus, the hook, from the regular verse. And then let's do that here too. And then in between, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of extra hi-hats. Not there, here. So it'll be like tits kind of thing. You'll hear it in a second. I'm going to just play it. I just want to draw it in real quick. And then we'll take a listen to it. And then this would be essentially would be your hook. And so then it's a different vibe to it. So you get that point. And so then what I'll do is that I'll drag over the tambourines, drag over the bass line because that usually stays the same. Actually, I'll just drag everything over just so you can hear it. So you see the crashes add a little bit more to what's going on. And like I said, I usually tend to add something else to it, just something that's a bit more brighter, or also I'll open up the filters on the 2 Europas here. So not on the bass one too much, but on the this other one I might. Just to add a bit of automation to it. It just kind of gives it a little extra something. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So let me just automate this. So what I'll go ahead and do is that I'll lower this to something a bit more lower, just to give it that effect a little bit more. So now the main arpeggiator will sound different, but kind of more filtered. I'm gonna increase the attack just a little bit, just so I can get that click out of there. All right, and so then here now we can go into the automation, and then I'll do a simple ramp. Maybe I'll do this and I'll curve it in. Oh, this is a new feature that they've added into Reason 11. I'm so glad they added that. So it's essentially just going to ramp up a little slower, and it's going to increase exponentially. And then I'm going to have it open up all the way at the top. So let me increase that. So here, and then I want to lower it back down to the level before that. So let me just not to the exact same level, but something around the same lines, and then have it be a little linger at the top end a little bit more. You'll hear this a little bit. So you see here how it's all filtered and cut off, and it just feels a little more enclosed. And let's just add let's bring in the other instruments here. So you see it's just filtered, and then it gets lost in the mix a little bit. I'm just gonna raise the volume a little bit, because essentially just supposed to be kind of more like a background singer kind of thing. Here comes the automation. You'll see it's gonna start ramping. And then it'll go back down to what the verse was playing before. So that's one way of adding a difference in terms of to differentiate between your hook and your verse. Because typically on the hook you want it to be a bit more amped up. And actually I kind of don't like that it's a little too slow to ramp up. So what I'll add is another thing here, kind of like a step in between. So it just kind of like it comes in a little bit more aggressive towards it. So we'll start here. And it stays in this level for a little bit longer, and then starts to increase again. So there you are, and then it just goes back into, this would be the entire loop essentially. Typically I want to have this doubled up. So typically speaking, and this is kind of a more old school type of, this is kind of like what you would hear from like 90s hip hop and stuff like that, where it's 4-on-4. There's no real triplet kind of stuff going on here. This is not like a trap beat or anything, obviously. So this is kind of more like if you're more, I guess, regular school kind of vibe. I wouldn't really know what to call it. So because it's like your basic boom bap beat, and you have 16 bars where you can essentially lay down your bars, lay down your lyrics, and then you have an 8-bar hook. So we're just gonna let this play again, and then you get like that increase in energy. I meant to loop it, but you get the idea. And then this just goes back to the beginning of this, which would be, all right. So, but I do want to add something a little bit more to it. Like I said, I like having something a little bit brighter to counteract like the more darker part of the verse. So let me add this other preset here that I enjoy working with. And it's just a classic saw wave that has a delay on it with a pan. So you hear it bounce between your left and right ear. And let me lower it in the mix just a bit because typically this is loud. Yeah, typically I would play this in, but like I said, I'm using the generic um, in order to stream and so you guys can actually hear what I'm actually playing for you guys. I can't use the what is called the ASIO driver, which would allow me to play at the same time as. Well, I can still play it. I can play it, but there's a delay for me. So there's like a 5 second delay. And that's a little too much. Well, not a 5 second delay, but there's a delay between me pressing a key on the MIDI keyboard and getting a sound back. So if you play it here, maybe something a little bit more on this side. So let's see. Maybe I can go. Let me just copy this. Let me copy this over. Let me remove all this extra stuff and maybe add some more to it, depending on how I see it develop. Actually, that sounded quite nice. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna add a little bit of reverb to it. Gonna disable. No, I'm not gonna disable that. Oops. Actually, I'm gonna disable that. Once it comes back around, we can see what it does. Let me add a little bit of chorus here. See how that sounds like. Yeah, that sounds good. Surprisingly. And typically the lyrics or any lyrics that I might have on any of my tracks are written by somebody else. I typically don't do a whole lot of that. My main thing has always been beats. So maybe what we can do now is actually layer it. Let me see here. Alright, so what I'll do here, I actually have an idea for something that can be differentiating between the verses, because that's something also that I like doing, is adding something on a different verse to give it a bit, a bit different movement. I just don't like it to be just the same thing over and over and over again, because it's just cause monotonous and you know it's boring. It's just that's all it is. I'm gonna here and add a circle bell. I'm gonna add some reverb to that. Maybe some delay. Maybe left and right. Yeah, we'll do that. All right, and then what I'm gonna go ahead and do. Oops, go back to my sequencer here. Pull up this so I can actually see it. I just want to be able to draw it kind of in the same way, but I want to be. What I want to do is that I want to have it come in like every half beat, essentially every half um half note coming in. Like you'll see it. Let me see here. So let's just see. So let me just put it on here. This might be too. I like that. I want to double it up though with one that's a little bit faster. Maybe I'll use this one for the verses and then a different one for the hook and stuff. So what I'll end up doing is shifting it over. No. Let me see here. So let's hear this. Kind of want to have it coming in between the beat and double it up. All right, let's see here. I think for the most part that's pretty good and done. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is just move it over, because I want to do an intro to this track. And typically the intros, everybody has like their own way of doing it. I typically like having just a very basic thing going on where I have the bass coming in. Oops. The bass coming in at a lower volume, and then having like another element to it, just to fill it in. Let me remove that, move these over to the next verse because that's what I'm trying to do. And this is all just after this, it's just kind of like what you want to do. I typically don't like having the tambourine coming in. And mostly for my like usual projects. I'll remove the drums on the third verse for just to add a break in between, and then I'll add the hook 3 times at the end. So just kind of fills in the song, aspect of it all. And then now it just kind of boils down to just doing a little bit of automation. This I'm actually gonna do this too, and then maybe remove this. I don't know, not yet, not yet. So I'll leave it at that for right now because it's fairly basic. And maybe what I'll actually end up doing is add some piano and stuff to this. Just add another layer to it, just so I can feel a little bit more full. It's doing all right so far. So like if we actually open it up, I just want to do a quick bit of effects here. So let me go into my bass here, and what I'll end up doing is I'll just add a quick effect to just to have it come in a little later. I like doing automation like this because then it just gives it a bit of more interesting stuff going on. So let me go into here, put that 0. So here you'll see that the violins come in full volume. I'll actually do another automation to the entirety of the track here. So at the beginning, if we go back to the sequencer, I have it come in sort of a little less than half volume, and then we'll have it build up towards the end. So then when the actual verse part of the song comes in, it will be at full volume. So let's listen to this. So you get the idea. So now we have an intro, which is not too long, and I don't think it's too short either. And it just kind of introduces some of the elements that are already going to be in the track. And then when the verse comes in, it's very basic. It's just like you hear the hi-hat coming in, the snare coming in. Really, that's all the additions. And now we have here for the secondary, like I like doing this too, where on the second half of the verse, I'll have another element come in just to, like I said, again, clear the monotony of what a beat is. Because if you really think about it, beats are very repetitive, and you can add a bit more movement to them and everything, and make them a bit more complex. But sometimes for the sake of doing stuff, you want to just get the stuff done. So let's see here. So that's done. So I think the intro's all right. I kind of want to add an effect overall. Maybe give it like a tape effect or something like that, just to make it sound a little bit more grimy, a little bit, a little different. So we'll go ahead and into our main bus, and add something here. So let's go into, where is the, oh, I'm looking at instruments. Let's go into, and let's get the Audiomatic Retro Transformer, which is essentially a pretty neat it's just an effect that comes in with Reason 9, I believe it came with. But here we're gonna add the vinyl effect to the entirety of the track. So let's see how that sounds. So you kind of hear, and every once in a while you hear a crackling of what would be the vinyl. I don't want to increase the effect a little too much, just because I don't want it to be like the mainstay. Like, I don't want you to like be too distracted by it. And so this comes the second verse, which you added something a little different to differentiate from the main of the primary, the first verse. Because the way I think about it in beats, I like having it be where the first verse is kind of like an introduction to the beat, into this track. Like the track, has its own thing. The second one, it's kind of like, oh, this is the beat. I'm established and everything. But it still like retains a lot of the same elements as the first verse. It just adds a little bit extra. And the hook, obviously, you see a lot of like all the elements come together with a little bit extra, just to differentiate it from between the verses and the hook. You can actually see the bell poke throughout the spectrum. Alright, so let's add another piece of automation. This is at the end of the track. And this would be kind of like the outro. Typically, I like having it be where it just kind of fades out. So I'll have the hook repeating a couple times. So you see here this automation that I've created. Essentially the same thing. It's just a volume automation where I'm reducing everything down to nil. And it's just a good outro. So you'll hear it in a second here. And you hear that the effect of the vinyl is still present. Let me transform it a little bit more. I just want to see a little bit more stuff come out of it. All right, so let's see. So we have our basic track kind of complete. For the most part, this is practically done. And I think it's been about an hour? Yeah, about an hour. About an hour worth of work for a beat that's, fairly decent sounding. Granted, this is not mixed all that well. It's not, a lot of it is going around or anything. But not a lot going on, I should say. But it's working for what we need. Maybe I'll add some more stuff to it. Maybe I'll EQ it a little bit differently. But I think for the most part, I think we're done for it. Really, the only thing left to do, and I'm really bad at this, but you should save every 10 minutes. This track was kind of completed right now, and I really didn't do much saving from the beginning. So what I'll go ahead and do now is that I'll save it. Typically, what I do is that I put in the BPM, and I already have like folders set up where stuff that's ready for vocals, stuff that might be stuff that's just like maybe potential projects that I'm working on. Um, and it's just to keep it organized, because you want to have some order in your chaos, to because when you're orderly, um, you can think a little bit better. You don't have to worry about it, like, or go looking for something. So what I'll go ahead and do here is let me just save this in my ready for vocals. For now, I'm gonna call this streamer day. And a lot of the tracks that I've actually make, especially for just to get a concept out, have followed this very basic pattern for me. If you want to get a little bit more creative, sometimes I'll do trap beats, and this obviously will not follow the same thing as this pattern sequence or whatever. Um, but yeah, for the most part, I think that's it. I usually do like exporting this entirety thing as a song, so that way I can send it to people who I know can rap or something that they might be interested in listening to. Um, and then while this is actually doing that, you might see a hit in frame rate, but should be okay. So right now, what you're seeing is that it's going through the entirety of the track, uh, changing all these MIDI notes into the corresponding audio files. I typically don't do a whole lot of live audio recording. I do have instruments, so I have a sequencer in here, and I actually have a couple. I'm sorry, couple of synthesizers around and a couple of drum machines. I don't typically use them all that much when I'm doing streams, just like I said, because there's a delay when I try to play something, and I can't work with that. So I'd rather, for when I do streams or when I do songs with the stream, that I typically just focus on drawing in the MIDI notes. Um, Typically before I start though, I kind of already have an idea of which key I'm gonna be in. And this is not a tutorial on essentially of like how to get started in music making or anything like that. This is just kind of like I said, it's just me working on some projects that, and if you can follow along, that'd be great. Maybe if you learn something, that'd be cool too. I didn't really go into a whole lot of like um, the word escapes me right now, but like the actual engineering of the sounds, working on sound design. There you go, sound design. Of the tracks or of the instruments that I've been using. This is something that I've. This is kind of like a first stream kind of thing, and I'm just kind of using the presets that I've already have built, and some of the ones that are already pre-built into Reason. So if you are new to Reason, actually, this is a good way to get started. And if you want to go into hip hop and stuff, this is what I do, what I use it for. I have worked on some EDM stuff. I'm not too well versed in it though, so then I'll just use, what I know what to do. But hopefully you guys learned something. And at least, or even if you didn't learn anything in terms of like audio design or sound design, you might learn something about the sequencing and how easy it is to actually just work on a melody, even if it's super basic. Say for instance, like the bass line for this is super basic and generic. If you go to, if like, this is not gonna win any awards in terms of like, oh, it's breaking ground or anything like that. Like, no, no, no. This is just for just so you can get started. And like I said, all of this that I have learned so far is self-taught. So I had to learn. I'm just kind of playing by ear most of the time. So if learning on your own is something that you like doing, then I hope that this helps in some way. But in the end, like, music is an art, and art is subjective. So what may sound good to me might not sound good to you. Um, and everything. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit me up. I have Twitter. Handle is Mad Red Hot. I'll try to add all the links to my social media on my Twitch homepage. And also maybe potentially have it be where, if you guys need to reach out to me, you can always just like send me a tweet or just get on the chat if you're actually watching live, and then we'll go from there. Maybe later down the line, I'll start a Discord server or something like that, and then we'll go from there. Like I said, once again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it wasn't too boring. And I hope you enjoyed some of the music that was being created. If you didn't, oh well, sorry. It is what it is. But I hope you have a good night. Thanks. Peace.